1978, and particularly the last months of 1978, with the Briggs Initiative, or the No on 6 campaign in California, and all of the work that we did, all the work that I did with Harvey and with others, and that both women and men did in fighting that proposition, which was about, seeing to it that homosexual school teachers did not influence our kids. In other words, taking away the jobs of homosexuals. That whole year was the year in which, or that whole season of the fall, was the season of the Wandergrounds going into print. And during the same week that Harvey was shot and Moscone, in that week we were reading The Galleys, for the publishing of the Wanderground. So in terms of their relatedness chronologically, they were very much a part of each other. The Wanderground, of course, represented nothing of the world in which men existed or even ruled, as was the case with the Briggs Initiative and with all the political work that I was doing. But and in addition, what was happening inside me was just the very beginnings of how important I knew it was for me to be a political activist and not withdraw entirely into a world that had been coming to me in all of the visions and so forth that came out as the Wanderground. In other words, that split between the activist me and the author me, or the Wanderground me, was just raising its head. And I was just beginning to have to deal with what it means to be a person who wants a world in which both of those things can exist, or both of the best of those worlds can exist. So it's fair to say that the Wanderground did not intrude much into my political life at that time, except that I was aware of the fact that it was lesbians who were I think it was lesbian women who were a lot of the energetic fire that set the independent or the autonomous women's movement going and kept it going through those years, the 1970s in particular. And it was that movement of women that stirred so many of us, both in the political realm and those of us who were off on the land, attempting to develop our psychic powers. Okay? Mm-hmm. So they were, the two things were congruent within me, but just barely so, because they were going to explode into all kinds of questions later on that would develop into the Little Blue Book, or into the Concho and the Magister. It was after spending Thanksgiving here at the land with, all of the women who were my friends, all of us who had some kind of vision of what it might be like to live sort of in the Wanderground, and who used the land at that time as a kind of retreat from the jobs that we were all doing in the city, lots of which had to do with being political activists. It's our schizophrenia again. I was driving down Highway 101, and it was when I came to what we call Squaw Rock, the Squaw Rock area, which is a very tight area that some of us who were Wanderground thinkers had thought might be the place where we set up the bunkers in order to keep the people from the city out, when we, who were going to redeem the land, made it all into the Wanderground up here in Northern California. We were right at Squaw Rock when my friend Peggy, who was in the car in front of us, there were 2 or 3 cars going back in tandem, pulled over and looked in the window of my car and said, Harvey Milk has been killed and George Moscone has been killed as well. And I have a feeling you'll want to hurry back to San Francisco. And I said, I'm not sure I can get back to San Francisco. I was astounded, and managed to scream and holler as loud as I really wanted to, because I was behind the wheel of a car and nobody could hear me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got back into the city on that day, still following, the other cars. And I drove down Van Ness Avenue to the south. And I went by City Hall, and everything looked normal. And it seemed incredible to me that people could just be going about their business on a day like that, when Harvey had been shot and killed. And then, of course, there was all the organizing that came, as a result of all of that. I felt like it was the joys of working with Harvey, the joys of working together with other women, in conjunction with men, probably, or lesbians and gay men together, for the first time in history in a real political setting. The joys of all of that and the joys of that victory were so up in my psyche, and I was feeling and had felt so good about that it was an incredible contrast to be brought down by the news of Harvey's death, and Moscone's as well. And so I was a long time, recuperating from that.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, during that period of time was when I lost my voice, actually, because we were all making so many speeches. And I remember thinking that there's not much that can be said after you have the death of one of the people, or two or three of the people, or even many of the people that have been so much an important part of your life. And yet, I kept up an extremely busy speaking schedule during that spring, and found myself with laryngitis and unable to speak to my classes during that same spring.